Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, here to help you with waiver wire pickups again. Look, maybe there's somebody out there that could help you, but it doesn't have to be this week. Maybe there's some smart stashes that you should be getting. So I'm going to tell you the guys that I think that you could stash right now that'll help you in the future with some early waiver wire pickups. All right, let's start with a guy who was actually a very sneaky, smart draft pick. That's Brian Robinson. So here's the thing, Brian Robinson, unfortunate incident, was shot in the leg right before the season began. It looked like he was going to be the RB1 in Washington, and then he was put on an IR. But that was a good thing because you know what? You got him at a discount, and he could still help you this season. So the fact that he was put on injured reserve means that if your league has IR spots, which it really should at this point, if it doesn't, talk to your commissioner. But you could have drafted him, put him in your IR spot, and then that clears up a roster space for you to go out and pick up somebody else, either before the season or right now. If you didn't already check out our waiver wire video, of course, you can do that now after this one. But let's talk about the fact that Robinson, even though, he'll miss those first 4 games for sure, we don't know exactly when he's going to be back. He's already doing some work on the side. It looks like he's going to be back before mid-season. That means pretty soon the guy who was going to be and maybe still will be the lead running back for an NFL team is possibly just floating out there on waivers. So if somebody didn't draft him and stash him, then you should be the one to do it. All right, so go ahead and pick him up. And you know what? You have that IR spot. You can do what I just said, add him. It doesn't even cost you a player that you have to drop. Going back to running back, so the first big injury, semi-big of the season was Eli Mitchell in San Francisco. So he's not out for the whole year, but he's going to miss maybe 2 months. All right, that's significant time. And San Francisco, usually a desirable spot for fantasy. So who's going to be the guy? Well, told you that Jeff Wilson is a starter. It looks like that's the case for right now. So he's somebody who I'm sure was plucked off waivers already. Who's the backup though? Honestly, Jeff Wilson didn't look that great in week 1, hasn't done a whole lot recently, and he's kind of just a guy, right? Obviously, he could get hurt too, or somebody else could impress. So who's the backup running back in San Francisco? I have no idea. And let's be honest, neither do you. Nobody knows because Kyle Shanahan has decided he wants to be following in the footsteps of Bill Belichick. And by that, I don't mean that he's got multiple championships or done anything of consequence. I mean that he wants to confuse us all and screw fantasy managers over by putting random running backs in at random times and not playing the guys who you would think would get play. So look, if logic followed, it would be Ty Davis-Price. He was a 3rd-round pick. He just came off a productive season at LSU. Looked pretty good in the preseason. So naturally, it's not going to be him. It's probably going to be undrafted free agent Jordan Mason. Now look, Mason also impressed in training camp. That's why he earned roster spot. And Trey Sermon, also a former 3rd-rounder, got cut. Okay, so Jordan Mason, also it's telling the fact that he was active, even though he didn't touch the ball in week 1. Davis-Price was inactive, a healthy scratch. Now, he's not the only rookie that happened to. Think Tyler Algier, a guy we thought would get plenty of opportunity in Atlanta. He didn't even get activated for the season opener. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I really think even though there's technically a battle between those two, you got to think Shanahan is preferring Mason at this point. So you cannot necessarily trust him, but he's got upside, and like I said, he's an injury or an impressive performance away from being the starter there for the foreseeable future. Would it really shock anybody at this point if a guy like Jordan Mason led the 49ers in rushing? That would be 6 straight years where they've had a different leading rusher. So Mason looks like the guy to stash for now. Now at receiver, there's a guy that I was really tempted to mention in my waiver wire video early in the week, but you kind of have to wait and see on a rookie receiver. But Kyle Phillips is somebody I definitely liked in the draft process. We know Ryan Tannehill likes him. He got a ton of targets in the preseason. Now, of course, take that for what it's worth. You see all sorts of guys with preseason stats that mean nothing in the regular season. But then we saw it in the regular season in week 1. Guess who was targeted the most in Tennessee? It wasn't Robert Woods. It wasn't Treylon Burks. It wasn't Austin Hooper. It was Kyle Phillips. Look, he's that prototypical slot receiver that has deceptive athleticism, right? He doesn't run a blazing 40 time. He didn't really do a lot to impress anybody in the combine, but he gets open and he catches the ball. And Ryan Tannehill loves guys that he can find across the middle of the field. He's never one who has had, extraordinary success with these X receiver types and throwing the ball deep. He prefers the safe pass, and he's going to go to Phillips, I think, a ton this year. So I'm buying into that early target volume. It may not be that consistent from week to week, but I think it's definitely a possibility. So Kyle Phillips is a guy I'm interested in. I don't love the matchup this week going against Buffalo, but you know what? If they're down big, maybe there's a lot of passing involved. Maybe we see even better from Phillips. So Phillips is definitely a guy worth stashing in full PPR leagues. In a non-PPR league, no, it's not worth it because he's probably not going to score too many touchdowns, and that catch after catch after catch really doesn't do you any good. And then a similar type of receiver, look, turned out to be a dud in week 1, but Paris Campbell is somebody who was, getting a little bit of interest in the preseason as a sleeper. He's always had the ability, he just hasn't been healthy at all in his NFL career. So that's never promised, but at this point, so far so good in that respect. Now again, week 1, it was all Michael Pittman. We didn't really see Campbell that involved, but that could change because look, we didn't really see Alec Pierce involved. He only got 2 targets, and we heard a lot of hype about him. I still think he's a viable deep threat, but Campbell's the guy who probably will have the bigger target share. It's not like anybody else really stepped up in that receiving core, and so, when there's weeks that Pittman gets blanketed or is just down, I think Campbell will see an uptick in targets, so he's a guy just to stash for now. We know Matt Ryan, capable quarterback, looked fine. We know this offense will have to pass more often in games where they're challenged a little bit more, so I think Campbell is still worth stashing for now. And then finally, a running back. You heard a lot about it if you watched Endgame, especially if you joined us or watched our live mock drafts throughout the preseason. If Rachaad White winds up being a league winner, all credit to my man Chris because he's been calling that. Look, Leonard Fournette looked really good in week 1, but now we're already hearing he's a little banged up, the hamstring is bothering him. I mean, he's a physical runner, and he is technically the workhorse, right? We didn't see anybody else even get on the field other than Rachaad White, and that was just on some passing downs. But I think that we're going to see White get more involved as the season goes on. And look, a lot of these rookie running backs weren't involved at all. I already mentioned those inactive guys. A guy like Dameon Pierce, we thought would be the lead runner. He didn't even touch the ball that much. So the fact that White is the clear number 2 is already a good sign. And I think the upside is, of course, there in that offense. And if Fournette gets banged up, then yeah, you definitely want to have Rachaad White sooner than later. So you know what? Why not preemptively strike? Grab him now and keep him on your bench before you have to spend up on him a couple of weeks from now. If you haven't checked out my waiver wire video from earlier this week, don't forget to do that. And of course, our playlist for everything that will help you win your week 2 matchup.